tapping in.
Are we live?
This week, we are sharing the work done by the folks in Chicago, Good Kids, Mad City, and Englewood.
Yes, sir. I love how you brought us in too, because this is a point where our personal life and our professional life connect in a big way, right? Even the title, Good Kids, Mad City, is a reference to Kendrick Lamar's album. We're big fans of Kendrick. Shout out the YouTube audience to see the TDE gear that my guy is wearing right now. You know what I'm saying? Like, so that album means a lot to us. Apparently, it meant a lot to a group of youth in Chicago as well who formed Good Kids, Mad City. It's a youth-led organization that aims to bring resources to underserved communities and promote safety by emphasizing community empowerment, right? And I've just been amazed and humbled by the work that they've been able to do as I've started to wade into the network of community support in Chicago as an aspiring organizer. And everywhere, all the spaces that I've been called to be at, they've been there, organized, right? And this is a group of young people. So their list of services that they provide to the community includes a leadership development curriculum for these young people that are getting civically engaged in their communities, interactive volunteer projects, job training. They have a food pantry. So you already seeing, bro, a lot of overlap from the things we do. So this is an organization that I thought it was important to shout out.
That's incredible. That's absolutely incredible work. Shout out to Good Kids, Mad City. It's always very encouraging when there is a time for the organized people, at least let me say the organized organizations, when there's a call for them to step up, and they do so in such a professional manner and in such a high standard. I think that's always very cool to see. I think that increases everybody in the field has to be able to adjust to that, because they're a point of reference for people to look at in terms of how to model themselves organization-wise on how to do the same type of thing, man. So it's dope to see that being led by young people that care about their city.
Yeah, fire that you mentioned, that organization, like, and the model too, right? They have a diversified leadership model, which means when you go to their website, there's no like about us that has like, oh, this is the person that's leading it. This is really a collective of youth that have really like found a way to have impact as a group, right? And that kind of the who's in charge, who's leading it fluctuates, and the emphasis is on the work, right? So that's amazing. In itself, right? So, and also when you talk about the professionalism of an organization, especially in nonprofit, it's about having the demands at the forefront, like the clear things that you want, right? So a couple of the things that I've come across that they're advocating for is one of them is their Peace Book Ordinance, which is to reallocate 2% of the police budget towards mental health services and school resources and other basic necessities in communities that are overlooked in Chicago and discriminated against, right? So that is like a very clear thing that they're working towards. They have on their website links to be able to donate and support a lot of the different initiatives that they have going on. So go check them out. It's GKMC18 on Instagram and Twitter. So go check them out. Amazing work, bro.
Yeah, and it's always so important to be able to highlight this type of thing. Miles, you were busy saying about the particular initiative of the 2%. What does it look like in practice in order to be able to get something like that to actually happen and go through? And where are they in the process, if you know?
I'm not sure where they are in the process as of now. If anybody from Good Kids is hearing this or is in connection with me, hook me up, let me know what's going on. But I know that one way that you achieve that is pressure, bro. You apply pressure and you apply that pressure consistently. So you call for this and you look at what's happening. Like earlier last year, Lori Lightfoot allocated $250 million of COVID relief towards the Chicago Police Department, right? Like that's a lot of money going towards the boys in blue, and communities are saying that they need that money, and they know of organizations, that there are stakeholders that are standing up, that are closer to the public, that maybe can use that money in a way that uplifts people, in a way that people want that money to be allocated. So if we're hearing things like this, we know where the money's not going where we want it to go, continuing to call that out, continuing to be vocal about that is one way. And so I just think that this organization is amazing, because the other way you do that is you continue to educate people around you, right? So they have education platforms to inform people about what these ordinances, these policy level things that they want to advocate for are, but also to advocate for people in the meantime while we address these policy issues, to learn how to take care of themselves and community. So they do this thing called treatment, not trauma, which would redirect mental health crises calls to mental health professionals instead of relying on ineffective policing. They're finding solutions that are community based, right? Rather than relying on these institutions. But we still holding these institutions accountable for both the funding that our tax dollars and where that's going, and for the harm that they're doing in our communities.
And this is stemming from a push from the Black Lives Matter movement, where the big call to justice in that movement was defunding the police, specifically in Chicago. Now, I can't say that's something particularly that I agree with in the sense of defunding the police and how it was stated, but I do agree that there does need to be a reallocation of how those funds are distributed, specifically to schools in Chicago.
Wait a minute.
Given
You just said you just said two opposite things. You said you disagree with defunding the police, but you think that the funds should be redistributed.
I said defunding the police how it was prescribed in the movement, which was complete defunding of the police. And I said I don't agree with complete defunding of the police. I do believe in redistribution of funds, though, which doesn't mean that the police get totally defunded, but that budget is also allocated towards specifically schools in Chicago.
Well, there's multiple conversations. So I just want to be clear that Good Kids Mad City, their proposal was that 2% of the police budget, which I think
that's what I like.
Was $35 million, which is crazy, right? But like, there's levels to this, because I wouldn't be so quick to dismiss abolition movements of the police, right? Because a lot of times when people hear abolition, they hear the complete removal of police. But actually what abolition movements and abolitionist teaching is about is how do we create the structures that mean that we no longer need police, right? What does it look like to actually put and invest in the different programs that support people from a people-focused perspective, right? Like in terms of mental health care services, in terms of responses to mental health crises, right, in real time, in terms of not addressing drug addiction problems or problems that really are to do with structural and social work issues as criminal issues, right? So when we say, a lot of people get real when you say abolish or defund the police, a lot of people jump to like, oh, we're gonna wake up tomorrow and there's no police? Who gonna protect me? But that's really not that's a really quick thought. It's really about how do we create a society where we as communities care for each other, where police aren't as necessary. And also thinking about what do police really do well right now.
Yeah.
So I just wouldn't be so quick. That's what I'm saying.
Thanks for like that clarity. That is a big distinction in how abolition movements actually like apply in practice, which is investing in things around the community that make it less dependent on police presence. But it does get difficult in a place like Chicago, specifically the South Side, and in a lot of communities of people of color in the US, is that they're heavily policed in a way that is not fitting that is not equally distributed. So a big part of that is also why there is the largest number of people in prisons are people of color, specifically Black men, and that speaks towards how broken the policing system is at the moment.
Big facts. And yeah, there's different contexts to policing internationally. But yeah, I think it's just important to think about, like, when I look at the police, I see one job that has 100 different jobs in it, right? And so my thought when you hear defund the police, it is an aggressive statement, in the sense that there is a need for accountability for the harm that police have brought to communities, particularly in the context of the United States, and particularly in the context of communities of color in the United States. So there is a call for that. And so when structures are attacked aggressively, people respond in a way that represents like our nervousness and our desire for things to stay the same in a lot of ways. So I understand, especially from with an international context, that removing the police in a lot of ways seems like an issue that's something that's untenable. But we got to think about think about the capacity of our communities, right? Take a strengths based approach and look at but what could we do? How affect in a place like Chicago, which you mentioned, right? We have all of these shootings, we have all of this violence going on, and we think oh, if we remove police, it'll be so much worse. But actually, how effective are they being in preventing violence? They're not, right?
But you have to look at what happened in New York after the police. A big portion of the police just effectively decided not to work following the Black Lives Matter strikes, and gun rates went through the roof, stabbing rates, robberies, crimes out.
Totally different scenario. That's exactly, see, when you remove something like that, and when you remove the police because the police said we're not going to show up to work or something like that, of course that's what you're going to have happen. But that's exactly the opposite of what I'm talking about. I'm talking about putting structures in place in preparation with the intention to support the communities without the removal of without police in them before you remove police, right? So there's a big difference between the police quitting and saying, oh, hey, look at what happens when we refuse to patrol the streets one day, and saying, actually, we're going to look at, from a policy perspective, at how much money of taxpayers' money gets allocated where in this city. And actually, we're going to redistribute it so that the things that address the root causes of violence, the reason people commit robberies, right? You ain't got no money, rob somebody with some money, right? When we talk about the people that are hungry, the people that are mentally ill, the people that could actually be addressed if social workers got some of those millions, right? If trauma-informed mental health care professionals got some of those millions of dollars, right? If workforce development, people that were working to put jobs together for people that have been justice involved, or who the education system has allowed to fall through the cracks, if those people had millions of dollars, and we gave those people those millions of dollars first, and then started to look at what it looks like to remove the over surveillance and over criminalization of people of color in these communities in an intentional way, not just we quit one day, but let's think about this. What could we do?
It's quite particular in the US because, again, people of color are the minority in the US, and so a large percentage of the population is quite unaware, if you will, of the realities that some people face, and to them that issue is as real as a war in Ukraine, where it is a atrocity, and sure, you can feel bad about it, but because it's not near you and you're quite removed from it, you'll never have to engage with it, therefore it doesn't exist. And so the type of momentum it would take to galvanize, like we saw in the Black Lives Matter movement, you need that same level of push, but from a infrastructure, from an institutional level, where you're now doing things like you've mentioned, which is going through the process of setting up the funds that will go to help the community, because in that there's a process in there and how it's received. And you're somebody that applies for these types of grants, and you work at the high level with institutions that work with these sorts of cash, the money that comes in to help the community. Do you think that organizations now could accommodate that type of influx of cash, or would it be a case where there's a lot of thievery that happens in it, or is it something that is that can happen immediately, can happen like this? More money equals more impact.
I think in the United States, you have a situation where the organizations that want to have that impact are all clamoring for a small amount of funds, which puts them in competition for each other. So I think if you increase that pool of funds, then and you look at the people who have a track record of doing the work, and these organizations are serious. These are organizations that have put evidence-based practices into their work in an effort to be competitive for these funds. So they are prepared in a lot of ways to accept these funds, right? I'm not saying that every program is going to have the exact impact that it proposes to have. I'm not going to say that there aren't complications when there's a huge influx of money, and that some people aren't going to abuse that, right? But what I am saying is that we have invested so much money in policing, and we've invested so much money in the status quo, that we're now at a point where that's clearly not working. Violence continues to go up, right? And so and it continues to get worse, continues to diversify, right? From just shootings that are gang involved to now carjackings, right, of innocent people, and putting the pressure on the communities isn't putting more pressure on these communities isn't has not been the solution, right? So we need to invest in them, like take a again. I love the policy clarity of Good Kids Mad City's call. 2%. Start with 2%, and when 2% is millions. Okay, but you have to also be prepared for when that starts to work to continue to yes, defund the police, right? And again, defund is aggressive language because there's accountability that they have to have, and particularly in this American context, particularly in the Chicago context. Shout out to the Chicago Torture Justice Museum from victims of violence that the police have perpetrated against Chicagoans, right? So like there's a deep history of abuse of police power here, and there is a wealth of data and information that shows that a shift toward investing in other things can have a positive effect on violence.